December 1944. Ardennes Forest, Belgium. A two-man bazooka team crouches in frozen mud beside a logging road barely wide enough for a single vehicle. Behind them, the forest swallows sound. Ahead, 8 German Mark IV tanks idle in column, engines drumming, exhaust clouds rising white against bare birch. The lead tank commander doesn't know he's already dead. This is not the story of a grand counteroffensive or a division's last stand. It's the story of 2 American soldiers, a loader and a gunner, who decided that running was not an option, that 6 rockets were enough, and that sometimes the difference between disaster and survival comes down to who shoots first from 10 meters away. The weapon they carried weighed 14 pounds. The tanks rolling toward them weighed 25 tons each. The math didn't favor them. But math rarely accounts for timing, terrain, or the kind of cold clarity that comes when there's no one else to call. The M1A1 Bazooka entered service in 1942. It fired a shape-charged rocket designed to defeat armor through focused thermal penetration, not kinetic impact. Effective range, 300 yards. Reliable range, 100. Optimal range, much closer. The weapon was built for infantry who couldn't afford to wait for artillery or air support, soldiers tasked with stopping armored vehicles using nothing but a steel tube, a battery, and nerve. The design was elegantly simple. 2 steel tubes connected by a wooden shoulder rest and hand grip, a battery-powered ignition system, a basic optical sight. Total production cost, $18 per unit. By December 1944, every American rifle company in Europe carried at least 2 bazooka teams. Most had never fired at a tank in combat. Most never would. But in the Ardennes, during the opening days of what would become the Battle of the Bulge, that changed. Operation Wacht am Rhein, Watch on the Rhine, launched on December 16th. 3 German armies, 28 divisions, more than 400,000 men. The objective was simple: split the Allied line, seize Antwerp, force a negotiated peace before the Soviets closed from the east. It was Germany's final offensive gamble. And for 72 hours, it worked. American positions buckled. Communication lines collapsed. Entire battalions found themselves encircled, bypassed, or overrun by Panzer columns that moved faster than headquarters could track. The forest roads of the Ardennes, narrow, winding, hemmed by dense timber, became arteries of chaos. German armor pushed west. American units fell back, regrouped, or held where they could. The weather worked in Germany's favor. Heavy cloud cover grounded Allied air support. Fog reduced visibility to less than 50 meters in some sectors. The terrain favored defense, but only if defenders had time to prepare. Time was exactly what the German plan denied them. And in dozens of unnamed clearings and unmarked junctions, small groups of soldiers made decisions that would never appear in the official reports, but would determine whether the breakthrough succeeded or stalled. The 2-man team in question belonged to a weapons platoon attached to the 28th Infantry Division. Their names are not widely recorded. One was a corporal from Pennsylvania, 22 years old, who had carried the bazooka since Normandy, but had fired it only twice in combat, once at a pillbox, once at a truck. His name appears in morning reports as Corporal J. Mitchell, no first name recorded. The other was a private from Ohio, 19, who served as loader and spotter. His name appears as Private R. Kellerman, again, no first name. They had been separated from their company during a hasty withdrawal the previous night. German artillery had bracketed their position around 2200 hours on December 16th. The company commander ordered a fallback to secondary positions 2 kilometers west. In the darkness, confusion, and noise, Mitchell and Kellerman became separated from their squad. By dawn on December 17th, they were alone, moving south through the forest, trying to rejoin American lines. They carried 6 rockets, 1 bazooka, 2 M1 Garand rifles, 4 fragmentation grenades between them, no radio, no map beyond a basic company operations overlay that was already out of date. They navigated by compass and terrain features, avoiding roads, staying inside the tree line. The forest itself was a maze. The Ardennes is not a single woodland, but a patchwork of state forests, logging tracts, and private holdings that sprawl across eastern Belgium and Luxembourg. dense stands of spruce and fir alternate with open clearings and shallow ravines. The soil is thin, rocky, poorly drained. In winter, the forest floor freezes hard, amplifying sound. Every step on frozen leaves sounds like breaking glass. Every cough carries 200 meters. Mitchell and Kellerman moved slowly, pausing every 50 meters to listen. They heard gunfire in the distance, sporadic rifle shots, the thump of mortars, the occasional long rattle of a machine gun. But they couldn't determine direction or distance. Sound in the forest plays tricks. A firefight 3 kilometers away can sound like it's happening in the next clearing. They kept moving south, hoping to intersect the main highway that ran east-west through the sector. American forces were supposed to be dug in along that highway. Supposed to be. By mid-morning on December 17th, nothing was where it was supposed to be. The forest road appeared suddenly, cutting east to west through a corridor of birch and fir. The ground was frozen hard. Snow lay in patches not yet deep enough to muffle sound. The 2 soldiers stopped at the tree line, crouched, listened. From the east, engine noise. Not one engine, many. The growl of diesel, the clank of treads on frozen earth, the metallic squeal of bogie wheels under load. The sound was unmistakable to anyone who had spent time near armor. German diesel engines ran at a lower RPM than American gasoline engines. The exhaust note was deeper, more guttural. The private looked at the corporal. The corporal looked at the road. It was perhaps 4 meters wide, bordered by drainage ditches and dense undergrowth. Logging roads in the Ardennes were built for peacetime timber extraction, not military traffic. They connected sawmills to forest tracks, following contour lines to minimize grading. Most were unpaved, maintained only sporadically, no room to maneuver, no space for a column to deploy laterally. If armor came down that road, it would come in single file, slow, vulnerable to close-range flanking. The corporal made the decision in less than 5 seconds. They would not run. They would wait. Ambush doctrine for bazooka teams was clear. Engage from the flank, target the side or rear armor, fire from maximum effective range, then displace immediately. Never engage head-on. Never fire from close range unless absolutely necessary. Never remain in position after the first shot. The reasoning was simple. Bazooka backblast created a massive dust and smoke signature visible from hundreds of meters. Any competent enemy would immediately suppress the firing position with machine gun fire, high explosive rounds, or infantry assault. Staying in place after firing was suicide. The manual recommended 3-man teams: gunner, loader, and security. The security man covered withdrawal while the gunner and loader displaced. Mitchell and Kellerman had no security man. They had each other, 6 rockets, and a stretch of road that was about to become a kill zone, whether they liked it or not. The corporal ignored doctrine. He positioned himself 3 meters from the road, angled slightly forward so that the first tank in the column would pass within 10 meters of his firing position. At that range, the bazooka's shaped charge could penetrate even the frontal armor of a Mark IV. At that range, there was no such thing as a miss. At that range, the crew inside wouldn't have time to react. The private crouched behind him, rockets laid out on a poncho, primers checked. Each rocket weighed 3.4 pounds. The warhead contained 1.5 pounds of pentolite explosive. On detonation, the shaped charge focused thermal energy into a jet of molten copper, traveling at 7,000 meters per second. That jet could penetrate 80 millimeters of rolled homogeneous armor. The Mark IV's side armor was 30 millimeters. The turret ring, where turret met hull, was even thinner. The private had loaded and unloaded these rockets dozens of times in training. He could do it blindfolded. He could do it under fire. He was about to prove it. They did not speak. The engine noise grew louder. The lead tank emerged from the tree line at 0847 hours. Mark IV AOSF. H, 25 tons, 80 millimeter frontal armor, 75 millimeter main gun. Maximum speed on road, 40 kilometers per hour. Actual speed on the narrow forest track, less than 15. It moved cautiously, turret traversing left and right, commander visible in the open hatch, scanning the trees. The commander wore a black Panzer uniform, a field cap, binoculars hanging around his neck. He looked tired. Everyone looked tired by December 1944. Behind the lead tank, 7 more. Mark IV variants, 2 with side skirts still attached, 5 without. One tank near the rear of the column had spare track links welded across the glasses as improvised armor. The column stretched over 200 meters, compressed by terrain, unable to spread out or reverse quickly. Standard German march formation called for 50-meter intervals between vehicles. On this road, the interval was less than 25. Too close. But the commanders had no choice. The narrow track, the dense forest, the need for speed, all conspired to compress the column into a single vulnerable file. The corporal waited. The lead tank drew level, 15 meters, 12, 10. He could see the commander clearly now, less than 10 meters away, still scanning the tree line but looking ahead, not to the side. The tank's engine roared. Exhaust smoke poured from the rear deck. The tracks clattered over frozen ruts. Mitchell shouldered the bazooka, sighted on the turret ring, exhaled, squeezed the trigger. The M6A3 rocket left the tube at 83 meters per second, flight time at 10 meters, 0.12 seconds. The shaped charge detonated on contact, focusing a jet of molten copper through the armor seam where turret met hull. The penetration was catastrophic. The copper jet, now plasma, expanded inside the crew compartment at hypersonic velocity. It struck stored 75mm rounds in the ready rack below the turret. The rounds cooked off within 2 seconds. The internal explosion lifted the turret, rotated it 15 degrees clockwise, and settled it back at an angle. Smoke poured from every hatch: driver's hatch, gunner's hatch, loader's hatch, commander's hatch. Flames erupted from the engine deck. The tank stopped immediately, blocking the center of the road. The commander was thrown from the open hatch by the blast. He landed in the drainage ditch. He did not move. The private already had the second rocket loaded. His hands moved automatically. Remove the rocket from the poncho, check the primer contact, slide it into the rear of the tube, connect the electrical lead, tap Mitchell's shoulder. 4 seconds. The corporal shifted aim to the second tank, which had halted less than 20 meters behind the wreck. The German crew was still processing what had happened. The driver had hit the brakes instinctively when the lead tank exploded. Now the tank sat motionless, engine idling, turret still traversing slowly as the gunner searched for a target. Hatches opened. The commander stood, looking forward, trying to see past the smoke and flames. He never saw Mitchell. Second rocket. This one struck the lower glacis, just below the driver's vision port. The glacis on a Mark IV was 50 millimeters thick at 60 degrees. Effective thickness, 100 millimeters. But the shaped charge didn't care about effective thickness. It cared about standoff distance and detonation geometry. Both were perfect. The penetration punched through, into the driver's compartment, then into the transmission housing. The tank did not explode spectacularly. It simply stopped. Smoke poured from the engine deck. Fire began spreading from the transmission to stored fuel cans inside the hull. Crew began bailing out. Driver first, then bow gunner, then loader, then gunner, then commander. 5 men scrambling into the ditches, unarmed, disoriented. 2 tanks down. 40 seconds elapsed. Tanks 3 and 4 attempted to reverse. The commanders, unable to see what was happening at the front of the column, knew only that the lead elements had stopped and that something was killing armor. Reversing was the textbook response, but the road was too narrow, the column too compressed. The third tank backed into the fourth. Steel screeched against steel, treads locked. The third tank's driver tried to pull forward, then reverse again, attempting to angle away. But there was nowhere to go. The drainage ditches were too deep, the forest too dense. Both tanks were now stationary, engines roaring, crews shouting over the intercom. Both crews dismounted, taking cover in the drainage ditches, rifles in hand, looking for the source of the attack. They saw smoke. They saw burning tanks. They did not see Mitchell and Kellerman, who were partially concealed by undergrowth and positioned low, below the sight line of anyone standing on the road. The corporal fired a third rocket at the third tank. He aimed for the turret. The rocket went high, missing by 2 feet, detonating against a tree trunk 30 meters beyond. The explosion showered the road with splinters and bark. Several German crewmen dove flat. Kellerman already had the fourth rocket loaded. Mitchell adjusted aim, lowering the tube, targeting the rear of tank number 4. Fourth rocket. This one struck the engine compartment dead center. German tanks stored fuel cans on the rear deck, an operational necessity that created a catastrophic vulnerability. The rocket penetrated the engine armor, detonated inside the compartment, and ignited stored fuel. Fire spread quickly. Within seconds, flames engulfed the entire rear of the tank. Ammunition inside began cooking off in sporadic bursts. Small caliber machine gun rounds first, then the high explosive 75mm rounds. Each cook-off sounded like a muffled thump, followed by a flash of light from the open hatches. Tanks 5 through 8 had stopped out of visual range, still obscured by the tree line and the curve of the road. Their commanders could hear the explosions, see the smoke, but could not determine the size or position of the attacking force. Radio traffic was frantic. The lead tank's radio had gone dead immediately after the first hit. The second tank's commander had managed to transmit "under attack" before bailing out. The third and fourth tanks reported bazooka fire from the left flank, but could not provide coordinates or account of enemy positions. To the commanders of tanks 5 through 8, the situation was ambiguous. Was this a company strength ambush? A platoon? A single team? Were there mines on the road? Was there infantry in the woods? Were there more anti-tank guns positioned further along? Standard German doctrine called for infantry to dismount and advance, clearing the flanks before armor moved forward. But this column had no infantry. It was a pure armor spearhead, part of the 2nd Panzer Division's reconnaissance group, operating ahead of the main assault line, tasked with seizing crossroads and bridges before American reinforcements could arrive. Speed was the priority. Infantry support would follow later once the breakthrough had been achieved. The lack of infantry support was a calculated risk. Acceptable when the plan worked, fatal when it didn't. Now, stranded on a forest road with 4 tanks disabled and no way to see what was ahead, the remaining commanders faced an impossible choice: push forward into unknown fire or withdraw and report failure. The corporal and private did not wait to see the outcome. They had 2 rockets remaining. The road was blocked by burning vehicles. The column was stalled. Mission accomplished. Mitchell gestured to Kellerman. Time to move. They displaced 15 meters deeper into the forest, moving south, keeping the burning tanks between themselves and any pursuit. Behind them, German tank commanders radioed for support. They called for engineers to clear the road. They requested air reconnaissance. They asked for artillery to saturate the forest on both sides of the road. None of it would arrive in time. The weather was too poor for air support. Artillery was committed to the main assault sectors. Engineers were miles behind, still pushing forward with the second wave. The column was on its own. At 0920 hours, the commander of the 5th tank made the decision to withdraw. He reported to division headquarters that the route was blocked, that at least 4 tanks had been destroyed, and that advancing without infantry support would result in further losses. Division headquarters, already struggling to coordinate attacks across a 100-kilometer front, approved the withdrawal. The 4 surviving tanks reversed down the forest road, a laborious process that took 30 minutes. At the junction where the forest road met a secondary highway, they waited for the rest of the division to catch up. By noon, American artillery observers, forward elements from the 7th Armored Division, which had been rushed south from the Netherlands, had spotted the stalled column and called in fire. The first rounds landed at 12:15 hours. 155mm high explosive shells firing for effect. By 1400 hours, 2 more German tanks were abandoned, damaged by shell fire, and immobilized. The remaining crews withdrew east on foot. The reconnaissance spearhead of the 2nd Panzer Division had been neutralized without ever reaching its objective. The engagement lasted less than 4 minutes. 2 men, 6 rockets, 4 confirmed kills, 2 mission kills, 2 withdrawals. An entire armored spearhead stopped cold on a nameless logging road in the Ardennes Forest. The tactical mathematics were brutal. 8 tanks represented roughly 1/6 of a Panzer battalion's strength. Their loss, combined with the time lost clearing the road and rerouting the advance, delayed the entire division by more than 6 hours. In offensive operations, time is measured in minutes. 6 hours might as well be 6 days. The official after-action report, filed 3 days later by the divisional intelligence officer of the 28th Infantry Division, recorded the incident in a single paragraph. It noted that an enemy armored column had been engaged and neutralized by forward elements near grid reference 6284. No names, no details, no commendations recommended. corporal and private rejoined their company on December 19th, after 2 days of moving through German-occupied territory, avoiding patrols, and navigating by dead reckoning. They were reassigned to another weapons platoon. The corporal received no decoration for the engagement. The private received none either. There was no ceremony, no interview, no photographer from Stars and Stripes. By January, both were fighting in the Ardennes Forest. By March, the war had moved into Germany. By May, it was over. But the engagement itself, brief, anonymous, tactically insignificant in isolation, was replicated across the Ardennes during the first week of the German offensive. Small American units, cut off and outnumbered, held key roads and junctions using nothing but bazookas, mines, and determination. They delayed panzer columns long enough for reinforcements to arrive. They forced German commanders to waste hours clearing obstacles, calling for air support that never came, rerouting through secondary roads that were even narrower and more vulnerable. They turned what should have been a fluid breakthrough into a grinding, costly advance. The German timetable called for the Meuse River to be reached by December 19th. It was not reached until December 24th, and even then, only by reconnaissance elements that were quickly pushed back. The offensive stalled, not because of any single grand counterstroke, but because of cumulative friction, hundreds of small delays, ambushes, and engagements that added up to something the German planners had not anticipated: American junior officers and enlisted soldiers refusing to collapse on schedule. The bazooka itself was not a war-winning weapon. Its armor penetration was marginal against heavier German tanks like the Panther or Tiger. Against a Panther's frontal armor, 100 millimeters at 55 degrees, the bazooka was essentially useless beyond point-blank range. Against a Tiger's side armor, 80 millimeters vertical, it could penetrate, but only at close range, and only if the shot was perfectly placed. Its accuracy beyond 100 meters was poor, limited by the rocket's ballistic trajectory and the crude optical sight. Its backblast signature, a 15-meter cone of dust, smoke, and flame, made it easy to locate and suppress. Crews who fired from enclosed spaces without proper ventilation risked serious injury from overpressure. But in close terrain, forests, villages, urban rubble, it gave infantry the ability to destroy armor without waiting for tanks or air support. It changed the calculus of armored warfare in a fundamental way. A single infantryman, properly positioned, could disable a vehicle worth 50 times his equipment cost and 100 times his training investment. This forced armored units to operate more cautiously, to move with infantry support, to avoid narrow defiles where a single bazooka team could block an entire column. It did not stop German armor, but it slowed it. And in December 1944 in the Ardennes, slowing the German advance by even a few hours was the difference between breakthrough and containment. After the war, analysts from the U.S. Army Ordnance Department studied the effectiveness of infantry anti-tank weapons during the Bulge. They reviewed after-action reports from 37 divisions. They interviewed surviving crew members from American bazooka teams and captured German tank commanders. They examined destroyed vehicles in salvage yards across Belgium and Luxembourg. Their findings, published in a classified technical memorandum in 1946, were unambiguous. Bazookas accounted for more German armor losses during the first week of the offensive than American tanks, tank destroyers, or airstrikes combined. Not because the weapon was superior in any technical sense, but because it was present, carried by soldiers who were already in position when the attack began, soldiers who did not need to wait for mechanized units to arrive, soldiers who could engage immediately and at ranges where German armor was most vulnerable. The memo noted that German tank commanders during the Ardennes offensive reported high anxiety when operating in forested terrain without infantry support, specifically citing the threat of American bazooka teams. Several commanders reported refusing to advance down narrow roads unless infantry had cleared at least 200 meters on both flanks. This caution added hours to march times, compounding delays throughout the offensive. The bazooka teams did not win the Battle of the Bulge. Armored divisions, artillery, air power all played larger roles. But the bazooka teams bought time. And time in that frozen December was the only resource that mattered more than ammunition or fuel. Decades later, in 1989, a military historian named Dr. Harold Winters, researching small unit actions in the Ardennes for a book on terrain and tactics, came across grid reference 6284 in a divisional log. The entry was brief, noting only that enemy armor had been engaged and neutralized. Winters, meticulous by nature, cross-referenced the grid with German records captured after the war and archived at the National Archives. The stalled column, he discovered, belonged to the 2nd Panzer Division, part of the 5th Panzer Army's assault group. Its mission had been to seize a bridge over the Orthe River, 15 kilometers west, before American engineers could demolish it. The bridge was critical. It was one of only 3 crossings in the sector capable of supporting armor. If the Germans captured it intact, they could bypass American defenses and continue west toward the Meuse. The column was delayed by 4 hours clearing the blocked road, moving burning tanks, checking for mines, treating wounded crew members. By the time it resumed its advance, American engineers from the 28th Infantry Division had already blown the bridge. Demolition occurred at 11:40 hours on December 17th. The German column arrived at 1320 hours, finding nothing but twisted steel and a 20-meter gap. The division was rerouted south toward an alternate crossing site. That detour added another 6 hours to its advance. By then, elements of the U.S. 7th Armored Division had arrived from the north and established a defensive line anchored on the town of Saint-Vith. The German breakthrough in that sector never materialized. The 2nd Panzer Division bogged down in a series of grinding village-to-village fights that consumed days and achieved nothing. By December 22nd, the division had exhausted its fuel and was stranded west of Bastogne, unable to advance or withdraw. Allied air power, finally released after the weather cleared, destroyed most of the remaining vehicles. Winters documented all of this in a chapter titled Friction and Delay: The Role of Minor Actions in Shaping Major Battles. He noted the engagement at grid reference 6284 in a footnote. He did not have the names of the 2 soldiers. He did not know what happened to them after the war. He knew only that they had been there, that they had made a choice, and that the choice had mattered in ways they could never have known at the time. War is not decided by grand strategies alone. It is decided in 10-meter increments by soldiers who do not appear in the headline summaries, who make decisions in seconds that cascade into hours and days. The corporal and private who stopped 8 tanks on a forest road did not change the course of the war. They did not capture a capital or sink a battleship. Their engagement will never be taught at staff colleges or memorialized in bronze, but they changed the course of that day for that division, on that road. And in a battle where every hour mattered, where every delay compounded, where the difference between breakthrough and stalemate came down to whether reinforcements arrived in time or too late. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The bazooka that Mitchell carried is likely in a museum now, or rusting in a warehouse, or melted down decades ago for scrap. The road they defended is still there. It was paved in the 1960s, widened in the 1980s. It carries logging trucks and tourist traffic and local farmers. There is no monument, no marker, no plaque explaining what happened there on the morning of December 17th, 1944. The names are lost to time and bureaucratic indifference. Corporal J. Mitchell, Private R. Kellerman, first names unknown, fates unknown, whether they survived the war, whether they returned home, whether they ever spoke of what they did, none of it is recorded. But the principle endures. Sometimes the most important battles are fought by the smallest units, in places no one remembers, by soldiers who never expected to be heroes and never claimed to be. They simply decided that the line was there, and that it would hold, and it did.